Welcome to my channel Limelight Leaks. Please share and subscribe, and hit the bell icon for latest updates. What is it? Wait, what is it? Behind the loud car engines and million-dollar deals at Gas Monkey Garage was a world of total craziness. And only one person saw it all. Christie Brimberry was the office manager, but her real job was like being a zookeeper. She was paid to handle a group of wild people. For years, she stayed quiet. But now, the truth is coming out about the 5 people who pushed her too far. Tom Smith. In a garage full of big personalities, Tom Smith was in his own league. He was not just loud. He was like a storm of energy that Christie Brimberry had to deal with every single day. One of her main jobs, as she once said, was just handling Tom. He was so hyper that she always had to remind him he was inside and needed to talk quieter or just leave the room. It was like taking care of a kid in a high-risk workshop where one mistake could cost thousands of dollars. Christie even joked that in a fight between Tom and an old ape, Tom would win because he would just talk so much the ape would run away. It was a funny line, but it showed a real problem. Tom's energy was always draining, a distraction that pulled Christie away from her real work of running the business, the schedules, and the money. Christie came from a world of hard work. She learned how to work hard from her dad, who ran an old-style meat shop his whole life. She knew what it meant to run a business the right way. But Tom treated Gas Monkey Garage like a playground. His need for attention all the time was more than just annoying. It was unprofessional for Christie, who was trying to keep the garage running like a well-oiled machine. Tom was like a wrench thrown into the gears every single day. She was the one who had to keep everything on track, balancing project costs and tight deadlines, a skill she learned from raising her 6 kids. Tom's behavior made that job almost impossible. But all that daily anger boiled over into something much worse. It led to a moment of such disrespect that it ended his career at Gas Monkey. The incident involved Richard Rawlings' personal Rolls-Royce, one of his most special cars. A fan who had a lung disease came to the garage hoping to see the amazing cars and maybe get a picture. Tom Smith and another mechanic, Jordan Butler, let the fan get close to the Rolls-Royce for a photo. When Richard found out, he was really mad. He reportedly yelled at the fan, using terrible words to order him away from the car. A manager stepped in and got mad at Tom and Jordan for letting it happen. Instead of understanding how serious this was, they were rude back. They told the manager to chill out in a very mean way. A few hours later, after a heated fight, Richard fired them both right away. For Christie, this was the worst betrayal. Her job was to protect the Gas Monkey brand and how people saw it. An incident involving a sick fan and the owner's special car was a public relations disaster. It made the garage look mean and unprofessional. Tom's carelessness created a mess that Christie had to clean up. It showed he had no respect for the business she worked so hard to build. He had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. From that day on, Tom Smith was not just the annoying guy in the shop. He was the man who put his own silly choices above the reputation of the whole garage. And for the woman who was like its guardian, that was something she would never forgive. The chaos of Tom Smith was finally gone, but his firing left a gap in the shop. Little did Christie know, a much bigger problem was coming. The most important person in the whole garage, the genius who made everything possible, was about to cause a crisis that would shake Gas Monkey to its core. Aaron Kaufman. Aaron Kaufman was known as the Bearded Wonder, and for good reason. He was the master mechanic, the quiet genius who could turn a pile of rust into a work of art. He was, as Richard Rawlings himself said, the heart of Gas Monkey Garage. For years, he and Richard were a team building an empire together. But behind the scenes, the pressure of being famous was getting to him. The garage had become a TV set, and the deadlines were no longer about building great cars. They were about making great television. Aaron got tired of it all. He wanted to work on bigger, more complicated projects. The kind of builds that took months, not weeks. The TV show needed quick flips, cars that could be finished in time for the next episode. This creative difference became a huge problem. Aaron felt like his talent was being wasted on small, repetitive jobs. He felt buried under the stress of cameras, sponsors, and impossible deadlines. So, in 2017, he made a decision that shocked the car world. He walked away from Gas Monkey Garage. To the public, it looked like an artist choosing his craft over fame. Aaron said he left to save himself, to protect the part of him that still loved the smell of grease and the roar of an engine. But for Christie Brimberry, his leaving was not a noble act. It was abandonment. It was a selfish decision that threw the whole operation into chaos and put the mess right on her desk. Suddenly, the garage was without its lead mechanic. The man who was the heart of every build was gone. Richard. Rawlings admitted that Aaron's leaving came completely out of nowhere, and that moving forward without his talents would be a really hard process. That really hard process was Christie's new reality. She was the one who had to manage the schedules, the parts orders, and the workflow of a garage that had just lost its most important member. The scramble to fill the void was immediate. They brought in a restoration expert named Jason Acker to oversee a couple of big projects. He was only supposed to be there temporarily, but after Aaron left, he was asked to stay on permanently as the new shop foreman. This showed just how unprepared they were for Aaron's exit. It created a massive logistical and morale crisis. For Christie, this was a deep frustration. Aaron talked about personal and professional differences of opinion, hinting at bad blood behind the scenes. But whatever his reasons, the result was the same. He chose his own creative freedom over the stability of the team he helped build. He left everyone else to deal with the fallout. While fans mourned the loss of their favorite mechanic, Christie had to manage the reality of his absence. She had to keep the business running while its very foundation had been ripped out. Aaron Kaufman may have been a genius with cars, but in Christie's eyes, he was the man who walked away when his family needed him most, leaving her to pick up the pieces. Dealing with the fallout from a star employee quitting was one thing, but soon Christie would have to watch another key player leave for reasons that felt like a slap in the face, especially given the personal battle she was about to begin. Casey Matthew. Casey Matthew was the master painter, the quiet artist who gave Gas Monkey's creations their soul. His work was perfect and his calm attitude was a welcome relief in a shop filled with loud personalities. But the life of a reality TV star was not for him. By 2015, after years on the show, the constant attention had started to wear him down. Fans would line up outside the shop, and if he tried to go out for lunch, he would be mobbed. The pressure of filming and the lack of privacy got old. So Casey made a choice. He decided to step away from Fast and allowed to go back to what he loved most, running his own paint shop and spending more time with his family. He didn't leave because of drama or a big fight. He left for his own peace of mind. He chose a quiet life over the fame and fortune of television. On the surface, it was an admirable decision, one that many people respected. But for Christie Brimberry, the timing of his leaving was a source of deep, unspoken frustration. Casey left in 2015 because the pressure of the show was too much to handle. Just a few months later, in October 2016, Christie's world was turned upside down. She was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. While Casey was enjoying the peace of his own shop, Christie was preparing for the fight of her life. She had to undergo chemotherapy and then a life-changing surgery to remove a cancerous lymph node. The procedure was difficult. A nerve to her larynx was cut and she was left with no voice for a long time. She had a tube in her throat and faced a recovery that could take up to 6 months. All of this was happening while she was still a mother to 6 children and a manager at one of the busiest and most chaotic garages on television. Think about that for a moment. Casey Matthew walked away from the job because the stress of being famous was too much. At the same time, Christie was facing a life-threatening illness, the ultimate stress. Yet, she had no choice but to keep going. She couldn't just quit. She had a family to support and a business that depended on her. She fought through the pain, the fear, and the silence, and eventually returned to the spotlight stronger than ever. Her strength was incredible, but watching a key team member leave because the job was too hard must have been infuriating. Casey had the luxury of choosing a quieter life. It was a choice Christie didn't have. He got to escape the very chaos she had to endure while also battling cancer. His leaving wasn't just an employee leaving. It was a stark reminder of the immense burden she carried, often alone. He chose peace while she was left to fight a war on two fronts. One for her health and one for the garage he left behind. As if dealing with internal departures wasn't enough, a new threat emerged from former employees. This time they weren't just leaving. They were starting a rival shop right under Christie's nose, creating a public circus that threatened to tarnish the Gas Monkey name. Scott McMillan. When an employee leaves, it creates problems. But when they join a direct competitor, it feels like a betrayal. That is exactly what Scott McMillan did. Scott was a former mechanic at Gas Monkey Garage. But after he left, he didn't just disappear. He teamed up with the two mechanics Richard had fired, Tom Smith and Jordan Butler, to start a new shop called Fired Up Garage. This new shop became the focus of a spin-off show, Misfit Garage. The entire point of Misfit Garage was to compete with Gas Monkey. The show was built on the idea that these misfits could build cars just as good as Richard's crew, proving that money wasn't everything. This created a public feud between the two garages. On television, it looked like a bitter rivalry, with Richard often showing up to taunt his former employees. For Christie Brimberry, this was a nightmare. A huge part of her job was managing the Gas Monkey brand and making sure it was seen as an elite, world-class operation. Now, there was a TV show dedicated to a tacky, dramatic rivalry starring their own ex-employees. Scott McMillan wasn't just working somewhere else. He was actively participating in a public spectacle that was directly tied to Gas Monkey. The truth behind the scenes was even more frustrating. The feud was mostly fake. Richard Rawlings was actually the landlord for the Fired Up Garage building, and he was also an executive producer on Misfit Garage. He was making money off the very rivalry that was causing Christie headaches. But the public didn't know that. All they saw was the drama. Misfit Garage was just as chaotic as Gas Monkey, if not more so. The shop was constantly losing staff, and there was endless fighting and arguing. In fact, Scott McMillan himself eventually quit Misfit Garage because he got sick of all the fussing. The very same reason many people left Gas Monkey. He left one circus only to join another. And then he left that one, too. For Christie, Scott McMillan and the Misfit Garage crew were a constant source of frustration. They were a cheap imitation that diluted the brand she worked so hard to build. They turned the craft of car building into petty reality TV drama. Every time they created a new fake fight or a new ridiculous storyline, it reflected back on Gas Monkey. Scott chose to be a part of that circus. He profited from a drama that Christie had to manage the negative consequences of. He wasn't just an ex-employee. He was a traitor who helped create a public embarrassment she had to face every day. Tom, Aaron, Casey, Scott. They were all sources of immense frustration for Christie. But as she managed each crisis, a bigger truth became clear. All these problems, all this chaos, all pointed back to one single person. The biggest problem in the garage was not one of the monkeys. It was the ringmaster himself, Richard Rawlings. For years, Christie Brimberry worked to bring order to the chaos of Gas Monkey Garage. She managed the wild mechanics, the impossible deadlines, and the constant pressure of a hit TV show. But the truth is, every fire she put out was started by the same person, her boss, Richard Rawlings. He was the architect of the success, but he was also the source of all the dysfunction. The person who caused Christie the most grief was the very man who signed her paychecks. It was Richard's sometimes harsh personality that set the tone for the entire garage. He was the one who was never far from controversy, the one who had fallouts with his staff so often that they would find themselves run out of the garage. Former associates have called him a jerk who fosters a culture of entitlement. He created the very environment that Christie was hired to control. Her job as zookeeper wasn't just about the employees. It was about managing the unpredictable and demanding ringmaster at the center of it all. Think about the other names on this list. Tom Smith was a chaotic employee, but it was Richard's explosive reaction during the Rolls-Royce incident that turned a mistake into a crisis. He was the one who allegedly screamed at a sick fan, creating a public relations nightmare that Christie had to deal with. Richard created a world where drama was good for television, and Tom was just a character in a show. Aaron Kaufman, the brilliant mechanic, left because he was burned out by the relentless TV deadlines and the lack of creative freedom. Who set those deadlines? Richard, who prioritized the brand and the show over the art of the build. Richard, his hands-on management style, and his focus on expanding his empire created the high-pressure environment that drove his best mechanic away. Even the misfit. Garage rivalry was Richard's creation. He owned the building they worked in and was a producer on their show. He manufactured the drama with Scott McMillan and the others because it was good for business. But it created a tacky, unprofessional image that undermined the elite brand Christie was trying to protect. Every problem traced back to him. Christie's job was an impossible one. She was hired to clean up the messes made by the very person who saw messes as a good business strategy. Her loyalty and professionalism were tested every single day. She had to survive not just the chaos of the garage, but the personality of the man who ruled it. While Richard was out making deals and becoming a star, Christie was back at the office holding everything together. She was the one ensuring that his empire didn't crumble from the inside out. The other 4 men on this list were just symptoms of the real problem. The true source of her frustration was Richard Rawlings himself. While the world watched the flashy cars and the loud drama, Christie Brimberry was the silent force holding Gas Monkey Garage together. Her calm and professional attitude hid a deep frustration with the very people who made the show a hit. She was the one who truly kept the wheels turning, managing the chaos while fighting her own personal battles with courage and grace. She proved she was tougher than any challenge, emerging as the true unsung hero of the garage.